This is the show that you are listening to about the boys, and I'm getting cross stern looks from the other host of the show, Rebecca Watson. I'm going to start over and do it again.
What a terrible intro. Allow me to bump in here. My name is Rebecca Watson, and you're listening to the Girls on Boys. No, you're listening to the Girls on the Boys. What did we decide?
I think Girls on Boys sounds a little bit more, it's a little bit more provocative.
Okay, you're listening to Girls on Boys, and we're not girls, but the boys aren't boys, so it's fair.
Yeah, I mean, we're women.
We are both women.
Yeah,
Are you?
I'm happy to be. I don't know if I'll be accepted that way, but
no.
The show is about the show, The Boys, correct? Am I in the right place?
So yes, and I've introduced myself, but this is my co-host. This is my sub-host. I wanted to decrease you a little bit.
I think that's valid. I'm Kaveh Hoda, and I'm going to be talking to Rebecca Watson, and we're going to be talking about the show, The Boys.
We're just two pals who like this show and want to talk about it and talk about it's an amazing satire of our current world that we live in that has a lot to say about misogyny and politics and men and women and superheroes and blowing up dicks. So
I agree. If you for some reason haven't seen the show and you're listening to this podcast, it's a little weird, but we support you and we'll try and walk you through it.
Yes.
I agree. Amazing satire. I think it's a great send up of the superhero genre and just like you said, society at large. This really funny and smart, I think, critique of big business, corporate PR, and it touches on like everything that we see from like, everything in modern, what we consider modern day sort of like stuff like Me Too, and they'll touch on like sexual harassment in the workplace. They'll touch on racism. It kind of covers a lot more topics than I think people would initially give it credit for.
So I think so. I run skepchick.org and I have a YouTube channel where I talk about feminism and critical thinking. And so I was interested in this in large part because, it does have a lot to say about misogyny and stuff. And also because I'm a giant dork and I do like superhero stuff. Kavi, what made you interested in this? And like maybe talk a little bit about your background.
So I am also a dork. And I also am a big comic book fan. We'll talk, I think, at some point, whether this episode or another, about like Marvel versus DC and all that stuff. I have a lot to say about that. But I did read this comic. And I did.
Okay. And let me just put in a real quick note is that you and I, like, we get along like gangbusters whenever we hang out, but I don't actually know that much about you. And I think ditto. So
I know everything about you.
Oh, you're actually a stalker.
Absolutely. But I know many people wouldn't think that because I am also a doctor, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily think of doctors as that kind of dork. You know what I mean? They think of us as just science dorks.
Right. You've spent all your dorkiness points on a career.
But I have so many more dorky points to give, is what people don't understand. So I will say this. So I read the comic. It's based on this comic by a guy named Garth Ennis. It ran from about 2006 to 2012. The show follows the basic premise, but the thing about the comic was I did not like it. I absolutely did not like the comic. I thought it was very misogynistic. I thought it was xenophobic, homophobic. I thought it was pretty trashy, if we're being honest. It was like one of these things that was like so out there and in your face. It's supposed to be like
edgy.
It's supposed to be edgy and supposed to be like maybe satire of those things. But in reality, I'm sure you're really good at these things where there's like a word to explain some weird phenomenon, like where someone's trying to make fun of something, but then they actually are like reinforcing that thing that they were trying to do satire on. Is there a word for that?
There is, and I can't think of it.
Yeah. This is one rare example of when a TV show or some film, something on the visual medium surpasses and transcends the source material. Like, I think the show does everything right where the comic went wrong. And that's why I really like it, because the concept is really fun, but then they take that and they make it so much more enjoyable because they don't fuck up quite so much. Does that make sense?
No, totally. Yeah. Yeah, because there is a really thin line between satire, the thing you're satirizing and like becoming it. Poe. So it's called a Poe, Poe, is the idea of when satire is so close to the original that it's indistinguishable from what it's satirizing. And and you can extend that to say, like, because of that, it doesn't necessarily have the impact that it maybe should. So
Right.
yeah, sometimes we refer to that as a Poe. But
Like
yeah,
Edgar
it's
Allan Poe? Is it from
no,
Edgar?
it's not. I don't think it's named after him. I think it's named after whoever. I think it's one of those internet rules
Got
that
you.
was sort of coined by someone named Poe. Maybe I might be wrong on that. But yeah, and it's kind of like, when we talk about Always Sunny in Philadelphia,
Yeah.
which is like horrible people,
Yeah.
where there's, I think they did a pretty good job of it, at least in their first 7 seasons or whatever, where it's like pretty much everybody like, oh, these characters are horrible people that I should not want to emulate.
Right.
But over time, it becomes something
A little bit blurrier.
maybe. Yeah, it becomes blurrier, and they lose, and the creator sort of loses control of it in a way. So satire in general, it's a tricky genre. And when the Colbert Show is another example. Stephen Colbert played a character who was a Republican satirical character, but researchers at the time his show was on polled conservatives and found a shocking number of them. And I won't even give you a number, but it was more than you would hope, thought that he was a real conservative, really saying the things that they agreed with. And they, and does that mean he was a failure as a satire? I don't know. I think it's more complicated than that. But yeah, satire it's a tricky thing. And so The Boys enters into that in a way that I think they do really well, because I think it's almost impossible for someone who agrees with the things that they're satirizing, because, and like, we'll get into the details, but we're about to do a sort of recap of the first 2 seasons. And at the end of the second season, the character Stormfront literally says to camera, people like what I say, they just don't like the word Nazi. It's like, it's at that point, it becomes tough for the Nazis to be like, to be like, wait a minute.
Right.
Is this show on my side?
Of us. Right. Okay, so let me give perhaps a little background on the story, just in case there's someone out there who hasn't seen it. So basically the comic and the show, they both take place in this world where superheroes exist. They're real, and they are completely corrupted by their power, by their celebrity status, and by this giant corporation that is behind them called Vought. So the heroes of the story are ostensibly the characters that would be villains in most comics, like these non-powered humans that are just have some bone to pick with these superpowered people for one reason or another. And there's this group called the Boys. It's led by the leader, this guy named Billy the Butcher, or Billy Butcher. I'm not sure if it's Billy the Butcher, but Butcher, I think, is what most people call him.
I think he's referred to both ways. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go with that. And Mother's Milk, another character, Marvin. The Frenchman, which I don't know if he has a name other than the Frenchman. He has Frenchie, and
they call him Frenchie.
Frenchie, okay.
Yeah.
And the character that I think is as a prime example of where the comic went wrong is, in the comics, there's a female character, and they just call her the Female. She's like that cliche.
Really?
Oh, yeah. They don't even give her a name. And she never speaks. She's just this quiet, like, Asian assassin. And that's like in the comics, like, like the one of the 2 female characters really in this thing that's a really strong character never speaks. you like
It's
you,
that's the quintessential like token feminist
Right.
Joss Whedon character. Joss Whedon, I loved him. I loved Buffy, as a younger person, but he had there must be some new term for like manic pixie dream girl, but
Yeah.
for like mute
Yeah.
martial arts expert
Right.
murderous girl child.
Right. Like Firefly, like the one woman character from Firefly. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And then there's a new character by the name of Huey Campbell, who, especially in the TV show, helps serve as sort of like the eyes of the viewer. He's like the fresh guy who's into this. He gets drawn into it basically because his girlfriend is accidentally killed by one of these superheroes called A-Train, who's a guy who runs really fast, accidentally kills his girlfriend because he's high on like superhero drugs. And that leads Huey, kind of the main character of the show, I guess, to joining this group where everyone in this group, including Huey, has some reason to get revenge on these superheroes. And they're like all sort of military trained with the exception of Huey. And during the last 2 seasons, it's pretty clear that this superhero group called the Seven, which is essentially like the Justice League, are completely amoral, corrupt, with the exception of this other character named Starlight, who is a new character. She's actually she's like this one person who wanted to be hero for the right reasons. Her and Huey get this relationship going. They go through a bunch of shit together, and they narrowly avoid being killed by the Homelander, who is their Superman godlike character and the scariest character on the show. And so the last season ends with this character you mentioned called Stormfront. She's a superhero and part of the Seven, and she becomes Homelander's girlfriend, but she's outed as a Nazi, and like an actual Nazi.
Literally from the Third Reich, has been alive since the 30s.
Real Nazi.
Actual Nazi.
As an aside, so at the end of the last season, she gets killed, or we think at least. So as an aside, 2 things I wanted to mention. The way they did her character was so fucking smart, I thought, because she's a Nazi, but she's super savvy. She's not like the way she speaks to the crowd, the way she gets people motivated, the way she plays on people's fears. Those are the Nazis that are really terrifying. The ones that are savvy and not just like obvious to everyone how evil they are.
Yeah, and this is what makes, I think, the show amazing, and what keeps me tuning in is that I think what I'm about to say is something that the showrunner identified early on as a problem with our current day society, which is that to the average American, a Nazi is a cartoon with a Hitler mustache and is easily identifiable, and we hate them. But also at the same time, minorities are having too many babies, and we should control immigration a little stronger. And there is some research to suggest that white people are actually more intelligent than other races, Right. So it's like it's easy, and she articulates it, as I mentioned earlier. People agree with me. They just don't like the word Nazi. And it's exactly that. She's a sexy woman who is charismatic, who uses social media really well. She has this, so they introduce her at doing an Instagram live stream at a conference where she's glad handing people. And that is, and this isn't a new idea. Like when fascism comes to America, it'll be waving a flag and holding the Bible. Who said that? Insert it here in editing. Orwell, I don't know. somebody smarter than me said it. When fascism comes to 2022 United States, it'll be on TikTok.
Totally.
And so, they really encapsulated this idea of young, sexy, charismatic Nazi that everybody just loves. And then it's once she's labeled with the the N word,
Yeah.
the Nazi word, then it becomes an issue, that they deal with in this first episode.
Okay, before we get to the first episode, let me ask you two questions about the show up to this point. One, who is your favorite character at this point?
Oof. Oh, that's a great question. So I kind of okay. So as of the end of the previous season, I really loved, this might be weird, but I really love the Deep. I love
interesting
because he had this. So he was a part of the Seven. He's Aquaman basically, and he gets kicked out for sexually harassing Starlight when she joins the team, and he gets sent to like Ohio or somewhere, where he joins Scientology essentially, and I was like, by season 2, I was like kind of invested in his storyline. And like after watching the first episode of season 3, I think that storyline has petered out and is done and gone. So I was a little disappointed in that because, I'm a critical thinker. I cut my teeth in part doing things like debunking Scientology and exposing it as a cult, 10 years ago, and campaigning against it. So I was kind of like, it's not that hot of a topic, so I understand why they might have dropped it. But I was kind of looking forward to like a cult storyline, getting more into that.
And the leader of the cult is an actor I love, that Croatian, or I think he's Bosnian Muslim or Croatian, I forget. Goran Visnic, he was from ER, the guy who played like the cult leader. I love that guy too. So I'm kind of bummed that he was in the show. From Welcome to Sarajevo. Remember that movie from way back?
I didn't see that.
Oh, it was a good movie at the time. Yeah. No,
unfortunately, I think that storyline wrapped up. But at the time of season 2, I was like kind of invested.
You know what? I think he's a great character too, because his character plays with mood more than any other character on the show does, because he's like comic and sad, and you kind of hate him too. So it's kind of like
he's really hateable.
But like,
but also like I wanted to root for him.
You know why? Because he's like that quintessential like white dude who like thinks he's the good guy and is really like doing really bad shit the whole time, and doesn't understand that he's sort of the villain, because he really believes he's the good guy in this.
And that's the part of his story that I'm still kind of excited for. I'm hoping that he recognizes his actual place in society, and that he figures his shit out and becomes more of a thing. But but who knows? My other favorite is the quote unquote female. I don't know if I was actually like,
she has
I was
a name.
biding time. I don't have they called her anything? Does that make me sexist?
You know what? I don't know, because if they have called her by her name, it's been very briefly, and I am stalling as I am looking up her name right now.
The actress is named Karen Fukuhara, and when I look at her on Wikipedia, it just says the female. So maybe we aren't sexist. Maybe they haven't actually said her name. She doesn't speak, and I loved her in this episode. Because she does have a dream sequence where she sings, and it's gorgeous, and I loved it.
She is mute. Her character is mute, which but
due to trauma. So
so I look at Wikipedia. It is Karen Fukuhara as Kimiko Miyashiro.
Oh, okay.
So, in the show, she does have a name.
Okay.
But even though she's mute, they have like things like dream sequences, or she starts to use sign language, and and she's very expressive. She's no longer just like this machine. They have more to go with her, but they've at least done better than the comics, and at least making her a well-rounded person.
I do think I am, look, I'm a human. I know if
You sure
people
are.
are listening to this that they don't know, they might not know, but I am.
Absolutely human,
And
people. Absolutely human. I can vouch for her being a
you
human.
can vouch. Yeah. So I do kind of fall for that, like kind of like cool, like svelte lady that like so to start season 3, it's been so long. I went back and I watched I had to watch a few because the official recap on Amazon is not good. It's like, oh, here's all the funny shit. Like here's a bunch of people blowing up. And it's like, I know a lot of people blowed up and it was funny. And it's funny that I just said blowed up.
Yeah.
But
just keeps getting
but I
funnier.
want to know the plot. So I watched a serious recap and I honestly like cracked up again at the end of season 2. You have the Nazi Stormfront getting kicked to shit by all of the women. Mm-hmm. And it was basically a mirror image of, I don't know if you were aware of the misogynistic backlash to the last Thanos movie, because like it, whatever the fuck it was called, I don't remember, but
you mean like
they
that
had
scene where all the women were like,
yes,
the action
and they're
shot.
like,
yeah.
And they're like, how dare you show all the women looking job? So that was stupid, because it's like, how often have we had all the men like, shut up? But also, it was fan service, but everything is fan service. Like, that's suck on a pacifier. But so The Boys, though, I think that scene was kind of a direct answer to that, where it was a really well written like thing where all of those characters had every good reason to have like 3 female characters just kicking the ever living shit out of another female character,
while the guys are just watching.
The boys are just
they
like,
can't do anything.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Well, it'll make it maybe perhaps more interesting for you to know that in the comics, how it works is Stormfront, that character is a man. And and in that fight scene, it's like this whole play on the Allies versus the Axis. It's like Britain's fighting him, and then the French guy starts fighting him, and then they're just biding time for the American guy to come in and beat him.
I didn't even think of that.
That's how they played it in the comics. But like in this one, I thought it was a lot better. And they even comment about it. They're like, "Oh, women can get things done.
Women can get things done." Yeah, like
it's better than it sounds when I say it right now.
No, yeah, in context, because like, and I think this is a good place to point out. Like, I think we expect too much of Disney and these like big studio pieces, where it's like, no, like, I'm sorry, but like this $8 billion summer blockbuster that needs to play in China and Russia and United States, middle America, like it's not going to solve patriarchy. And sometimes they are going to like throw out things that are like, oh, here's a little piece for you that's not going to piss off these other people, maybe. Like, obviously they fucked up on that one because it did piss off the MRAs, but we can't, like, those big movies are never going to do that. But The Boys, and like, we can't even expect a streaming service tentpole to do something like that, because they could easily, like, most of these streaming services cancel shows after 2 to 3 seasons. So it's really, I love that this is a show that they don't seem to give a shit, and
I think it's working for them, because I think it's like one of the biggest shows on the their streaming service.
Here is the best compliment I can give to The Boys, is that tonight when I went to watch the first episode of season 3, my husband was like, "You opened the wrong app." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "You opened the wrong app." I was like, "No." He's like, no, it's an Amazon show, not an HBO show.
Oh, you thought it was HBO good.
Yes, I thought it was HBO good because HBO generally spends more money and gives fewer shits.
Yeah.
So
I have to say, I mean, I think I agree. I don't know if I watch anything else on Amazon Prime. This is like the reason, like this is my go-to show for them.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you one more question.
Okay.
What has, and this may be a little tougher, up to this point, what do you think the most intense scene has been? The one that stuck with you the most from the prior 2 seasons?
That's a really good question because there have been so many great scenes, and that's a stupid answer.
It's a valid one.
But like, and it might be because, okay, so I did want to do a full rewatch of the previous 2 seasons before this season, but I didn't have time. So my answer is going to change because we are going to do another episode where, and I'm calling this now, I'm demanding it now, where we rewatch the earlier episodes so that I can answer this properly. But
try and stop me.
But the scene that sticks out in my mind is honestly the first episode where A-Train blasts his girlfriend into bits and pieces, and because it informs everything following. And I think that they do a really good job of centering her death, and like now we're in season 3, but I found myself even in season 3 where they were framing Huey's relationship with Starlight.
Yeah.
As they have the Billy Joel song playing and it's just like magical. And my first thought was like, but what about your girlfriend who got blasted all to pieces? And like for his character, it has been a while. He's been through a lot. So it does make sense that he's moving on. But then he's on stage later with A-Train and they don't even have to, there's no flashback or anything. A-Train just comes over, puts his arm around him, is like, "Hey man, who you wearing?" And my immediate thought was like, he murdered your girlfriend. And I think that speaks to how powerful that initial moment was. And it was also like the first thing that told you that the show is going to be extraordinarily violent and upsetting. And you just had to like go along with that.
Yeah.
So for me, that was like a really key moment. What about you though? Like what?
For me,
what would be yours?
Okay. So for me, there is a scene where, and it's a pretty pivotal scene because it comes back to haunt the Homelander later. There is a scene where Maeve, which is another superhero with an actual conscience, and the superhero Homelander, this godlike Superman character, go to try and thwart a hijacking on an airplane.
Oh
which
my God.
Already, by the way, as an Iranian guy, I have a low threshold for Hollywood doing scenes with Middle Easterners like hijacking planes. But
planes.
So it's a testament to like how much I like the show that I'm like, all right, I'm gonna put that aside for now. I'm gonna put aside that bullshit for now,
right?
In hopes that they'll deal with that at some point. But so the basic premise, if someone hasn't seen it or if they want to remember it, is that they go to thwart these hijackers, but Homelander, with his overzeal and excess, lasers the whole like control panel. So he not only kills all the hijackers, but he destroys the plane such that it cannot land anymore. And there's nobody that can land the plane. And so him and Maeve are in this really weird situation where they're in this plane full of people who are so happy that he came to save them. And they're like, "Oh my God, his superheroes come to save us." But then they realize they can't really save these people and they have to leave them there to die. because the Homelander is like, well, what can I do? I can't help land this plane in the middle of the ocean. And she's like, well, can't you help bring it down like Superman would do or something? And he's like, no, that's crazy. What are you, stupid? I can't do that. And then they're like, okay, well, at least take these little girls. And you could feel the panic of the people on the plane is like, please don't leave us here to die. Take our kids. And he's like, no, I can't. So this kid can then tell everyone what we did. And so then they leave the whole plane there to die. Like, it's so intense because you feel that pressure that they're under, and you feel kind of why he makes that decision, but you are so mad because you feel for the people on this plane at the same time. And the horror, especially as a parent, as you're trying to get someone to take your kid off the plane, that's all you want, and they won't do it. It's intense. And it's not, it kind of has a little bit of humor in it, tiny touches of it, but it's mostly just fucking super hardcore intense.
It's mostly just anus puckering and like deep cringe and horror. And I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because I do think that so I think that the first two seasons have been great in terms of their satire and their social commentary. But this first episode of season 3, really, which we will get into, really, to me, highlighted I feel like they are zeroing in on something that's extremely important. And so that scene in the plane obviously comes back again and again and again. And I think it goes to the heart of what the show is about in a number of ways, in that, like, you can't give someone so much power that they can solve anything. And also, if you give the wrong person too much power, they don't know what to do with it. And if you give someone the ability to act with impunity, with no repercussions, they will act to ensure that they never have to face any repercussions. And is this a bad time to mention Uvalde shooting?
No,
is that bad?
Yeah. No, it's
because just today, as on the day that we're recording this, I read that, there was this past week, there was another school shooting. One woman we knew early on, she was a mother of children that were in the school. The cops stayed outside for at least 45 minutes to an hour without doing anything. And a mother begged them. And when they wouldn't go in, they handcuffed her. She got out of the handcuffs, ran into the school, and got her own 2 children out of the school. And we knew that early on because she spoke to the press. And today we learned that the police threatened to charge her with obstruction of justice if she continued to speak to the press about what happened. And I think it's really interesting that this show that was filmed months ago and started years ago is literally talking about that exact thing. The cops with their vests and their assault rifles and their tanks and their billions of dollars were cowards in the face of the thing that we supposedly gave them all of these things and all of this money to stop. Mm-hmm. And when they did the wrong thing, they used that money and power to stop people from talking about how they fucked up. And that is exactly what has been happening in The Boys.
I think The Watchmen tried to do that. Like, who watches The Watchmen?
Oh, and this is definitely a child of The Watchmen.
Right. Yeah. But I think it does it better. Like, I feel like this does it a lot better. particularly than the movie Watchmen. But yeah, you're exactly right. Like with this uncontrolled power, I think that I haven't seen anything more than the first episode, but I've seen the trailers now where the Butcher seems to be taking this new compound V24 that gives him temporary superpowers. I'm assuming that's going to come into play. Like what happens when you have unchecked power, even someone who's trying to do the right thing, what happens to them?
So yeah, it's just like I think that it's in a way it's a classic story of good versus evil, but it allows us to have a more nuanced and interesting discussion about what is good. And I'm really excited about this upcoming season because they are introducing the political angle. And I think in a lot of superhero stories, you have the superhero and you have the supervillain. And, and sometimes we have our anti-heroes, even Batman is in a way like, oh, you couldn't do enough, so I'm doing it instead. But in this case, it seems like, and we can get into this later, but it seems like we are looking at like, well, if you have let's say you have a supervillain, but they're not just a random guy that's out there terrorizing people. What if and the seasons 1 and 2 were about like, what if they are controlled by a corporation? And so that's like one level. But now it seems like we're entering into this conversation of, well, what if the corporation has politicians? Mm-hmm. And to me, that's so, so, so important, because what I hope for this is that we're going to see a satirical dissection of moderate, like neoliberalism, where it's like, well, we just need to have some oversight of these big corporations. And so long as we have that, we should all be fine. But are we?
Do you think the show is sort of a rebuke on capitalism?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Couldn't get that yes out strongly enough.
So on my, I occasionally play video games on Twitch, and I have a bot on my channel where if someone just types problem, the bot will respond, the problem is capitalism. Because so often, even while I'm just playing video games and chatting with people, we get into these discussions where we're like, why are things like this? And why don't we do things this way? And then somebody will just be like, exclamation point, problem. And the bot will be like, the problem is capitalism. And I think that the boys, I think at the heart, I think the problem is capitalism, and like a centrist, like both sides are wrong kind of neo-lib view of the world. Yeah. So I love that, because it's not easy, because there's no easy answer. I don't think, and again, like I've only seen the first episode of the 3rd season. So this isn't even a spoiler or anything. I don't think like Billy Butcher is right about everything. And I don't think Huey is right about everything. I don't think Giancarlo Esposito is right about everything. Or even, and I don't think any of those characters are necessarily wrong about everything. But I think all of them are dealing with systemic problems that have led to this horrific shit show.
All right, well, let's do this. How about we've been doing this for a while now. Why don't we
have
too long.
Yeah, we've been like, I'm so sorry. Look, I have had 3 glasses of rosé. It's a Saturday night. Can I just, you're recording this.
I've had like 25 milligrams of Benadryl and like 5 hot toddies because of this cold. So I feel like I'm at your level. And if I remember any of this when it's all said and done, I'm going to be impressed.
Okay.
But why don't we do this? Why don't we stop this episode here? This is our little intro episode for you guys. We'll have another episode coming up shortly. with a recap of the first episode of season 3. And if you want, it'll give you a little time to go watch some of the other seasons if you like. I guess, is there anything you want to plug before we do that?
Follow me on Twitter at Rebecca Watson. That's all.
But your YouTube channel is so good. Can you tell people about?
Yeah, but I don't know the address.
But you then post it on your Twitter.
It's on my Twitter.
Okay.
If you go to my Twitter, you can figure it out.
Your videos are so good. Honestly,
you.
They're super duper smart. I really learn a ton from them. I watch them. I write shit down, and then I steal your lines and pretend they were mine. That's how good they are.
Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
Exactly.
So I'll take it.
And you can follow
me. And how about you?
You can follow me at the House of Pod on Twitter. I have a podcast called The House of Pod. It's sort of a humor adjacent medical podcast.
It's a fantastic, and I also love it, even though I'm not a doctor, and a lot of it is doctor stuff, but I fucking love listening to it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Trying to get too far into the weeds. Okay, stay tuned for an episode of what I'm pretty sure we are now calling Girls on Boys.
Girls on Boys.
See
you next time.
This is like I've been doing hot toddies like for the last couple hours.
Is that what it is?
It is, but now it's gotten to the point.
But you're sick.
Yeah, because it's for my health.